Yeah, my girlfriend's dad did a 7-day fast for his, I think it was like for his birthday or something like that recently, just this past year. And he said he feels amazing, and he talked about the benefits of fasting and how, it is basically the time for your body to repair, right? So it's like not on intake. And I wonder if this this time for your body to repair, um, I wonder why that is associated with a turn up of senses, or why it equates to a turn up of senses, because that's
Yeah.
something he mentioned as well, is that when you're not spending all your resources digesting and it's on healing, um, yeah, there's just like a different kind of felt sense to your life, to your body.
hmm I think, I mean, what part of me says that it could be related to the quality of what we consume is that there's something that dulls us within the quality of our food.
Mm,
And then also it could be is that when you enter a certain stage of hunger, when it's like it's become so pronounced that it's almost overwhelming. Like, 7 days, it's a whole different, you know, that's a whole
well,
different road out here.
yeah, right.
But like, even after that point, when I get to that place of like, wow, I'm hungry. I haven't felt this hungry in a long time. Um, Everything in my body is telling me to eat. But then the longer I maintain with that, and I even did some meditation with it, is that kind of normalizes.
Mm,
So you can focus on other things. It's still present, but it's not nagging. And I think that what it does is it puts you into a heightened state almost out of necessity. It's like,
sure,
I
right,
need food soon.
right.
So I'm now in a more capable state of hunting and gathering.
That makes sense.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's what came to my mind. Um, it also, I here in Dublin, um, I always enjoy kind of wherever I'm at, interacting and spending time with like local, homeless people. And Dublin definitely has a problem with it, and like it's not at the same scale as the United States in any means, but there's a lot of homeless people in Dublin for how small of a city it is. And there's not always, because drug use is intermingled in here and is present, but there's almost always this quality to the eyes that they have, where it's like that they are looking, that they can see, and that they are sensitive to things, and that they might turn to things, and we might assume that might be paranoia, and it totally could be. I also think though that because likely they're hungry and likely they're deprived of certain things, is that they're kind of in an involuntary fast.
Mm,
They're starving. Um, but in that state, I think is a heightened degree of awareness. I would say in my many conversations with locals, international, you know, visitors and students and homeless people, I would say the people who actually have almost always a more spiritual perspective or more present perspective, even if it could be borderline schizophrenic, um, the homeless people by far always have a more spiritual bend.
yeah, yeah. It's so interesting, man. The Americans, outlook on wisdom from homeless individuals versus somewhere like India. Uh, Rory talks about his mentor Joshi Baba, and how he
Mm-hmm,
was
mm-hmm.
basically a homeless guy on the side of the street, but they had this like amazing connection, and he had proved to Rory over and over again that he was legit, and his kind of not just spiritual understanding, but also spiritual ability, and the things that he had seen Joshi Baba do in his own presence. It's kind of fascinating. But even in the last podcast I did with Ramon, Ramon also mentioned a homeless guy that he used to hang out with that was like super wise and had all this wisdom about how light was formed. He's talking about in the Bible, like
Mm-hmm.
God said, "Let there be light." He's like, no, light like developed and took time and then like formed together. And then he talked about it was basically, I mean, I'll have to go back and reference it, but it was like light. light, something else, and love were like these three powers. I can't remember what the other one was, but he talked about love as being a newer force in the world. The thing that really struck me was something that Ramon said, where it was like, when humans discover love, it will be like discovering fire for a second time. And I think this is something that comes out whenever somebody practices a lot of meditation or loving kindness meditation.
Mm-hmm.
Is like, there's the three stages, right? The one stage is you start with sending love to yourself, then you start with sending love to another person that you care about, and then to a difficult person is stage three. And most people find that whenever you start trying to send love to yourself, you're like, I don't deserve it. Right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't deserve this love. I maybe I get a little bit of love, but I did that stuff. I failed here. I fall short over here. And so like, I don't get all the love, right? I was that person in that situation. And whatever you do to like kind of like hold yourself to not give yourself love. And then what's interesting, you move to number two, the second one. You're just like, oh, I'll give myself love later. Let me just do what's easier, what seems easier, right? And
Mm-hmm.
sending somebody else love. And then like you think up your best friend, or even think up like your mother or father or whatever, someone that's close in your life that you never want out of your life. And it seems easy to just send love to that person.
Mm-hmm.
But what happens is you start cultivating love, and then you start kind of weighing the value of how much love you should send. And then you're like, oh, this came up. They did this in my life. There's this. And maybe I'm not sending them all that love. And you start finding these little rifts in the connection between you and this other person, and you and yourself, and
Mm-hmm.
you and other people. And, you know, the one thing that I realized where is like, if I wasn't sending myself that love, that means like I was caring more about punishing myself for who I was than who I could be if I just loved myself or gave myself, all the energy to be whoever I wanted to be, to reach my ideal. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Because that's what ultimately gets in the way. If we can't send ourselves love, then we don't think we deserve the ideal versions of ourselves. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
An interesting thing as far as like what love is as an energy, and how it's kind of like something we're still discovering and it's still being created.
I think I subscribe more to the idea that love is a fundamental and imminent phenomena. So like the perception of not love, or it are barriers, is that the love exists no matter what, but that for many reasons we construct these barriers, and it's taking away those barriers to experience the love. We're not creating the love. It's the love is present for eternity. I think love is another way of just saying the force that binds the totality of everything together. And I think also I heard something that inspired this line of thinking recently. When you're talking about, I feel love for this person, but oh, they slighted me here, or there's a kink in the hose there, or problem. I think a lot of what we colloquially refer to it as love, at least in the Western context, it's reward for desired behavior.
Mm,
And so it's, I give you love on the condition
conditional love.
that you do XYZ, right? Whereas I think that there is a fundamental love. It like when we feel, I think the most loved is when we least deserve it.
Mm,
And so let's say we fucked up as much as possible to the
mm,
nth degree
mm.
in our own definition and in another person's eyes as well. And we're expecting, we're expecting the shame, we're expecting, punishment, we're expecting the
Right.
withdrawal, and yet we still receive love. Because in that moment, it proves to us it's not conditional.
Mm.
And of course, there's still dynamic things to be worked out between, human relationships. But I think that kind of eternal and imminent love is unconditional.
Yeah. it gets into like this kind of esoteric space where it's like, where is love? Is that, yeah, like a fundamental force? Like the Platonists would say the ground of all being is
Mm-hmm.
good, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if we could say that that ground of being, the existence of that fundamentally is love. And then as organisms become more, as more complex, maybe, as more capacity, like a human does, we have this ability to kind of cultivate and channel love, like almost in like that's the piece of God awareness in us to allow us to
Mm.
do that, right?
Like amplify it almost.
It, so Hazrat Inaya Khan, right, is a Sufi that brought Sufism to the West. He believed that that will, and not love, but will, um, came from God, and that your concentration or your ability to concentrate, um, was how you directed that love, right? Or I'm sorry, that directed that will rather. And
Mm-hmm.
so,
Mm-hmm.
like, if I can channel my will from God through my concentration, then I will get things kind of done. But if I can't concentrate, then the will is kind of all over the place, and people, that can't concentrate don't get things done, right? That's kind of like Hazrat Inaya Khan's perspective. But as a Sufi, um, in this worship of love, basically, in this like, religion of love, yes, it's a force out there, but I think humans are in, and I don't even know if it's just human. It's hard to really. This is actually leading into one of the things I wanted to talk with you about, because these fundamental forces that, like, that things get connected in with, right? As like Ramon was mentioning before, um, our cells, like we started out as a single cell, right? Like if we go all the way back to the beginning of life, and the way he described it was, the cell's position in reality was either the thing that's going to it's going to bump into is going to want to eat it, or it's going to want to envelop that thing, right? So it's
Mm-hmm.
in like
Mm-hmm.
this constant state of like, I'm hungry, I need something, but everything can kill me. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So like we and everything else kind of evolved out of this like anxiety space to like move forward. And sometimes things did evolve in the means of like love and connectedness, and sometimes things evolved in the means of like war and like, you know, like being a part of a chimp colony would be fucking terrifying, dude.
Woof.
But like, it's
Woof.
good. Like the ground of base is like, there's good things that happen there, of course, but then like they have this side of them where they're gonna go and like rip apart another like rival chimp tribe or something like
Mm-hmm.
that. Same in humans, same in wolves. I don't know, like where is like, okay, a snow leopard, right? It's like isolated almost its entire life. It has like a territory where it marks so that other snow leopards know, like, hey, don't come around here unless like you want to find out, you know?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And or they're like out to mate, but it's this like separation and this constant hunting, and this way that the pattern of that life evolved was, I can't be too close to others. Everything's a fight for resources, and I'm going to kill whatever I find and like eat it for mine. Is that a evolution of love? Where's love there, right?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. Um, that is a good question. Um, it makes me think. Are you familiar with Piaget?
Yeah.
I think so. Uh, so my research here has been surrounding play and its role in moral pro-social development. And I was reading, and this will connect back to this idea of the snow leopard. I was reading this cool article today about dodgeball in America, and and the article was making the case and laying out both sides, but making the case that dodgeball is training the wrong set of skills. It is, and I so from a play or game-based lens is that a game is a container that has a set of rules, and there is a condition for success in the game. And that condition for success will require a behavior, and the better you get at X behavior, the more likely you are to win at that game, right? And so whatever the game is, you will get good at the behavior of the game. You just practice, right? And so what what they were arguing, well, I don't know if I necessarily agree with the article fundamentally, because I think that there's still a place for games like dodgeball. But they were offering some really interesting. I think the core insight is depending upon the games that we play, will determine our actions, determines what we train habitually.
Yes.
And so, like, let's say the game that the snow leopard plays is every man for himself, territorial, survival of the fittest kind of game. And that works for them, or has worked for however long that species has been around. Because I think the actual idea of a successful game is one that can be reiterated and perpetuated over time. And so I think where I'm going with this is that the love, to take it maybe a little outside of just the human understanding of love, because we have, familial, friendship, romantic, all these different forms of love. A snow leopard probably does, the mother, being a mammal, does feel love for its children. I think that is the distinctive element of mammals and birds, is that the mother, not always the father, but that the mother has a connection to rear the children until a certain point, and then they, separate. And so I think the love is present there from a maternal element. But back to the kind of game idea, it's the play. It is the interaction in the game, whatever the game is, that I think is, from a gut place, I need to find the logic, but from a gut place is that it's in that play or that interaction that love in a form is present, even if the game is brutal.
Well, yeah. However, yes, I agree with that. And obviously, being a jiu-jitsu practitioner, I have to agree with that, right?
Yeah. That's a good example.
But what's interesting is, like, you think of the evolution of the predator, and especially, and we'll just stick on the snow lion thing. It's like the mother's love for its cubs up to a certain stage of those cubs' lives, right? Because there is a point where they're just like, I'm going my own way now, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then when they go their own way,
the house,
or they're kicked out of the house, then they're just kind of like these, like, almost killing machines, right? Which is fine, right? Like, because it's almost like death has to come one way or the other, right? It's like, and we see this with, like, cycles of rabbits and stuff. Like, I know that there's species of rabbits in America that are on this 7-year cycle where it's like they'll get to this level of population, and then disease will happen, and it'll, like, wipe them all out to a certain level, and then they'll grow population again, and then and so it's like there's some sort of regulator on the population of, like, these animals, and in this, like, I guess, at least in their territory, or in the, I guess, the temporal levels, maybe that's the wrong word, but the climate kind of where they're at. So it's almost like the predator is a necessary evolution, and is that, it's just kind of an interesting thing to wonder where the love is in the creation of the predator in that sense, right? It's because it allows. Yeah, go ahead. I'm curious what you think.
I would say the creation, maybe this is kind of an Abrahamic thing, but the creation in and of itself is the love. It did not have to exist.
it didn't have to exist, but its existence does have pleasure, like say a pack of wolves, right? Like there's a lot of pleasure in the pack. There's actually a lot of love that happens specifically from the female wolves because they'll raise anything that wanders into the pack, which is
Mm-hmm.
kind of interesting. Like they've been known to raise turtles, coyotes. There was
Whoa,
that one woman in Russia that actually was raised by wolves, and like watching her run around, the fact that she's alive is like
that's crazy.
insane. But watching her like run on all fours is wild to see. But that baby, as a baby, she's defended, or a toddler, however old she was when she got lost, was defended by a female wolf that saw her as part of the pack and was like, no, this is my kin, and that's what we're going to treat this as, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so like, even though the pack would be like a hunting machine, and like the last thing you want to do if you're in the woods is like come across that, right? um So there's like all this terror for what they would inflict on things outside the pack. Um, and so I guess, yeah, I could see love in the mixture of that, but I guess it's less so in some of these things that are like, say, like a barracuda, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
like
Mm-hmm.
there's no love really in a barracuda. It's like drops the eggs and it just like goes after just taking chunks out of stuff, or like those cookie cutter fish that just like come up the giant tuna and just like scoop out an ice cream scoop of their skin and
Yeah.
swim away.
Well,
Um,
and so then I think that this leads us to a distinction between the our human perspective of love,
mhm.
and then a another phenomena that we also, or many traditions, refer to as love, that is outside of that just human view, and it is not bound in the same way by certain characteristics. And this is kind of where I'm going back. It's circling back to the conditional versus the unconditional. The unconditional love is there whether you like it or not. It's present. And I think that the act of existence, of just being there, is unconditional. You know, you could have conditions of how you survive, how you live, and all this stuff, but the being, whatever it is, the barracuda, the snowline, did not decide to be born to, to our knowledge of how things work. And so it's that there is an unconditional element to creation. It just is. It's not warranted, it's not asked for. And so that there is a gift element to just being, to being in existence, to whatever you are. And I think that the hesitancy that we're finding is that versus our perception of how other animals behave, and how it seems to us from a mammalian perspective cold, and without our experience of love.
And I agree that yeah, it's almost like, we have this moral thing about the preservation of life ultimately being good and showing love, but that's not what love looks like in like an animal perspective. But to linger on this like condition and unconditional, if we think about like, say like a God presence of creation, right?
Mm-hmm.
That gifts existence to things, and that is like the goodness. Maybe in the long term, and there are conditional things, right? Because like there's two things that come up. One, it's like all of the existences that had to happen in order to make humans, we really got to be thankful for. Because imagine like how long it just took to evolve a kidney,
Yeah.
or
To go
like
from
how long
shrew, yeah, to, yeah,
all that,
to
the
bipedal.
pain.
Yeah.
Oh my God, so much pain. So much pain so that, when we were talking the other day about dorsal,
Yeah,
responses
polyvagal
and like
theory. Yeah.
polyvagal theory, and like having, the whole body shut down before you get into this, you know, yeah, before you feel too much of it, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But the other thing I wanted to bring up was the conditions. So it's like if we're thinking of a God consciousness creating beings, the conditions are earth, right? So it's like if you survive in water, if you survive in amphibious environment, if you survive in the woods, whatever, combination, the condition is, can you make it there? Right. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so like this path of the snow leopard, I don't know what their numbers are like, but um, they might be an expression of like the origin of their evolution. That is God trying to know itself by exploring all the varieties that evolution can basically populate.
Mm-hmm.
And that might be one that was trying on this idea of like what it could be, the snow leopard, right? And then it's expressing itself fully in like the species that it is. But as the numbers dwindle and the earth changes, their numbers seem to be dwindling as well. So it kind of makes their existence a little less true, right, than others, because it's not scalable. You see?
Yeah, yeah, I see what you mean, and yet I would take that large scale of the species of a snow leopard, um, or any species that is now extinct. Let's say, because it is extinct now, is it not valid?
That's what nature says.
Well, I don't even think nature says that. I think we say that.
But I mean,
I think
if
this is
they
our competitive frame, is that we want to dominate. We are top of the hierarchy. And so we're like, anything that loses is like, well, sucks for you. But when you're looking at the whole of evolution, um, just because something lived once and is now gone
mm,
doesn't mean it wasn't a valid aspect of creation. And so I'll even take that
sure,
big, like a species,
yeah,
microcosm to someone that is past. They were once here, they are now gone. Still valid.
yeah, and you're right for what that species meant or how it acted in the environment at the time.
Mm-hmm.
For instance, like maybe a species that is now extinct provided a food source for another species that continued and needed them as a food source at that point in time or whatever, right? Like it, there are points in time where they are valid, right? And like have contributed, and there's value there without a doubt. I guess what I'm speaking more to is the objectivity of nature, the fact that nature doesn't really care, and the fact that like here's the thing you got to survive in, go survive, and if you don't, you didn't evolve the tools. um and then like yes, you were valid in that moment in time, but like I think nature, it's like if you didn't keep up with the changes, you're kind of shaken out to be not as true, you know
Not
not the right idea.
maybe not the right idea.
Yeah.
Or I don't know if I don't know if the language we're using is exactly effective just yet. Because I think nature is building upon itself,
Yes.
and so we could say Neanderthals were not the right idea,
Hmm.
but part of them is with us.
Right.
So they live on via, via us.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so I think within our Western framework, we, in contrast to more, Eastern ways of thinking, is we have this tendency to reduce to categories, to isolate the individual, to understand the individual, and then derive principle from the individual. Um, I think those categories get super blurry. And so,
Like the category of truth or not.
yes, in the category of species, like we just say, oh, this is that species because we observe it to tick these boxes. Um,
Mm.
but if it adapts and changes and we then call it a new species, it's almost like Ship of Theseus kind of thing. Do you know what I'm talking about?
No, same more.
It's like an ancient Greek like parable. So there's a boat, and it's one by one you remove and replace all of all of the pieces of the boat.
Oh, okay.
You know
Mm-hmm.
you know what I'm talking about?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah.
And you get to at a certain moment where the boat is still there, but all of the pieces are no longer the original pieces. Is it still the boat? And it is both yes and no. And that's kind of the distinction I'm getting at is that, let's say, to keep with that analogy, the animal species or the behaviors that manifest in the animal kingdom or within nature that don't last could just be a piece of the wood that got rotten and was replaced. But it's still a part of this larger, there's a word called egregore, or the egregore, I forget, but it's this amalgamation, this creature of amalgamation.
Hmm. Yeah. And yeah, I think we're saying the same thing. Like,
Mm-hmm.
because it was valid in those times. Like, I'm going to use a jujitsu metaphor actually.
Yeah.
When you begin, um, everyone is like a fish out of water on the mat, right? It's like a whole new way to like
No, that was
have a
me.
relationship with your body and like,
Yep.
yeah, right. So yeah, figure all this stuff out. So like, what's interesting is when you're training with people that are less trained, you'll find some success with some stuff that'll work. And you'll be like, oh man, now I can do a guillotine, or like, now I got the rear naked choke perfect, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you'll roll against an upper belt and you'll be like, I don't think I've ever trained jujitsu in my life, right? You'll just
Mm-hmm.
have that like experience where it's like, wow, they just made me feel like I've never done this.
Yeah.
Um, and and then you realize like, oh, maybe my move set, maybe my like philosophy on this and my the way I'm going about it isn't as true as I think it is, or it isn't as true as if we scale the challenge, right? It's like, so like, yes, the skill building is necessary in order to like get to the higher ranks and to like get to the higher skill level, um but ultimately there's a reason why you have to throw that stuff away, right? It's
Yeah,
less
yeah, yeah.
valid for the coming time. It was necessary in
Yes.
the moment, but
Yes.
like there's time to peel back.
So
And
so
maybe that is love, right? And maybe that is an expression of love, the sharpening.
growth.
It's
Yeah.
growth, and it's
Yeah.
accuracy, it's truth. Um, and it's expression, right? Because like I almost said optimization, but it's optimization of your individual expression. Not in like a uniform way. You know
Mm-hmm.
what I mean? And which is
Mm-hmm.
again a nature metaphor. I think that's what nature also is doing. You know,
Mm.
um,
How would you define your use of the word truth or true? Something that is true, a set of behaviors or an action that is true.
um, kind of like like it's the phrase "it is what it is." It's kind of like, okay, so what? So true. I mean, this is so much more than so I like to think of it in a metaphorical and in a like physical way, right? Or a observable way. So it's like when we look at a lot of mythology and Bible, like passages and stuff, like, whether they really happened or not, it doesn't necessarily matter. If the metaphor it speaks truth to an individual, then there's truth to be found there, right? I find a ton of truth in a lot of mythology. Do I believe that, say, Yama from like the Buddhist deity of impermanence, like embodied a headless monk and put a bull head on top of that body and like went to slay the entire town of Tibet? It's like, no, I don't really think that happened. Does it make sense in the story and the mythology? Yes. So there's that, right? But then there's like the practical truth of is like, okay, the jujitsu example I just gave, you know,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yes, I
Then
see. I
and
see.
that's like the two I can see right now, and I'm not even think that's probably a limited view, but those are the two that come up.
But I think those are two strong views, though, and I think when we're talking about nature, I think we're circling a lot around the former, the kind of it is what it is. I think formally in epistemology, this is pragmatism. And so like that truth is that which works.
Right.
And it was interesting. I was reading something recently. It's a book called Symbolic Interactionism. I'm looking at it. And it was outlining pragmatism because it's based on pragmatism, but that we humans will adopt something as true if it works. If it works in a certain setting in relation to a certain goal. And then as soon as it no longer works, it's no longer true and we adopt the next thing. And so it was saying that what we humans believe to be true colloquially for ourselves actually has no relationship necessarily with what is actually true.
Right. Most of the time, I agree with that.
It's all context dependent and drive goal dependent, and that's okay. Actually, I think it's what it's saying because it's just a way of navigating.
Well, then, yeah. So then this would be another differentiation. There is truth in like societal truth, like how we navigate society and culture. And then there's also ultimate truth, right? And then there's
Mhm.
relative truth, and there's like all this bullshit, which I don't know. Of course, I want to accept relative truth, and I think that that's probably just the wrong framework, because there is validity in everyone's individual authentic expression, and that's not going to show up the same. And to say that that authenticity is not true, like I think that can be like a relative thing, right?
Well, I think it can be
But
true to them,
true to that. That's what I mean by relative. Yeah, it's
but
like
it could be an authentic expression of them at that moment. I think the question though becomes is it an accurate representation of the objective reality?
right, like, and when we're in a hyper real, like I often say, jujitsu is the most real thing I do because
In
it's
contrast with
not
hyperreal
in contrast with the hyper real society that is like, full of
media. Yeah.
not just media, but like, even like, okay, go to a grocery store, right? And it's like, it's made to look like either like a fresh market or like, it's a what's interesting is like, I mean, consider a Sprouts, right? Trying to go to Sprouts because it's like, oh, it's fresh, it's good, it's supposed to look like a farmer's market inside there. Even the little crates they put the fruit in are supposed to like look like those crates. It's supposed to mimic this kind of like freshness, a
I see.
simulation of like a fresh market, which is a simulation of the markets that we used to go to, like the farm stands and stuff, where the farmer
Mm-hmm.
would actually like deliver the goods to this farm stand. But like we just don't have that in like modern society anymore in the same way. So we have these businesses that make simulations of this fresh ethical, homegrown kind of
Mm-hmm.
outlook. And so we go there, we have this kind of perspective as we're shopping around. Most of the stuff is done like factory farming, where agricultural companies have like literal gag laws, not being able to like see inside. Like we don't know
Mm-hmm.
where our food comes from at all, how the animals are treated whatsoever. We have the marketing that shows us this beautiful cheeseburger with the cheese melting over top of it and all the like luscious shit. And then like, we're like, yeah, that's what I want. Like having no idea where all that stuff came from, or all the chemicals that are put on it, all the preservatives and stuff like that. And so it's like, and then you get to the point where it's like, not only is everything in that environment almost like fake or modified, but whenever you get up to the cashier and they have like, their whole perspective of what they think is real on top of that, and
Mm-hmm.
they believe this media source and they come from this place and they have this religion, and all these things create this framework of truth that you'd have to like negotiate with, basically, to have like a standard interaction with a person. And it's
And,
like,
so when we've discussed hyper real before, but just to clarify, so I'm on the same page, is that humans have this tendency to add abstractive layers or layers of representation and simulation um, onto reality, to
mhm.
the point where hyper real is so many layers that you're so far removed from from the
The
actual
original.
reality. And so,
Yeah.
okay, so this makes sense now when you're talking about jujitsu as a very real thing, base,
Hmm. Right.
um, because it responds in real time in reality. Like there's no there's
No
no
latency.
simulation. There's no latency. Yeah, yeah,
No interpretate. No thing to be like. You know. Uh. Well, the way I see it, I did choke him out. Right. Like no.
yeah,
There's
yeah, yeah, yeah.
no.
It's either you
There is
choked him out or
no.
you didn't. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's like there is no room for that. And so like we can't sit here and just debate relative truth about an armbar. Your
Hmm.
arm's broken or not. And so it's like, um, yeah. So, just to linger on there's three sections of hyperreality. I think it's important that like Baudrillard breaks out is the simulation, the simulacra, and hyperreality. Right? Simulation is literally the difference between say like the farm stand and like Sprouts. Like I said, there's like
Yeah.
a you can see the line of simulation, right? When we start selling like 3D printed meat, right? And grocery shops look like a Tesla dealership and like it's all cold, then like that will be the simulacra of the farm stand, right? Because it's like broken off of the origin.
Multiple layered over.
Right, right. And so like now then people will be trying to simulate the original 3D printed meat store, right? And then that will be the ongoing kind of like simulation, which then becomes a simulacra, meaning a simulation of a simulation not tied to an origin anymore. It's just simulating simulations over and
Oh,
over
that's
again.
fascinating.
And so it's like the image of Jesus that we have right now is a great example
Hmm. Hmm.
because like we think of a guy, long brown hair, like blue eyes, white skin, goatee, a whole thing. And even if you somehow use like found Jesus' remains and like did a 3D reconstruction of his body and showed the most devout believer the face of Jesus, it would mean nothing compared to the face of Jesus they've been worshiping their entire life. That face is more real than any real face of Jesus could ever be, right? Same with the Buddha and all that. So what's interesting is we're stuck with this image and we know that's a simulation of another image, but we don't have an ability to get to the origin of it. So now we're just like stuck with this like simulacra of Jesus, right? Creating
Hmm.
this hyperreal image of Jesus or Buddha
Yeah,
or
where people
whoever.
are it's basically a massive game of telephone,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Where it
Right.
just continuously changes and alters, and then you are at some point the word is totally or the symbol is totally changed, and then the next layer onto it is a simulation or an adaptation from this totally new thing.
Yeah, and that's why Baudrillard said that Disneyland is the ideal city of America, basically. And he said that
Interesting.
it stands. What does he say? It's like the fact that it exists gives this reflection that everything else about our society is real, right? Basically, showing us that we have to go back to reality, and reality is sitting in front of your desk for 8 hours a day, like typing away on a computer for some like mega company that
Hmm.
doesn't give a shit about you, that you're going to be replaced by a bot in no time with, and like
Yeah.
then you're going to
Yeah.
go home and like consume media and like consume your TV dinner, and everything that you are involved with is basically like built on the backs of we don't know the origin of where anything comes from. It's like this technology, slave labor mined it, right? The food that we eat, most likely factory farming. The clothes that we wear, mostly a sweatshop, has
Hmm.
delivered all of these things. Not to mention where our gasoline comes from and all this stuff. And we're just like sitting there on TV talking about how racist our neighbor potentially is by supporting one political party or the other. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah. Yeah.
like
Yeah.
that's why we're just like in this hyper real universe, in it feels like a universe in our society because it feels like it encapsulates all of truth, this like postmodern social constructivism that ends up being like our god in our society. So anyway, that was just the point I was trying to make about it, but yeah.
What do you think? So, because I definitely perceive this as a phenomenon. Why would the human species develop this capacity?
I mean, I have no idea. but actually I do. I have a theory. This is my idea about it. See if I can like actually put it into okay, so like what do you believe the evolution of consciousness is for?
Um, for shits and giggles, I think.
That's it.
Yeah, I mean, maybe at a fundamentally deep level, yeah, I think God has a sense of humor. Um, I think the evolution of consciousness, the evolution of consciousness from human beings.
Yeah, like why are we self-aware?
Oh,
Why have we evolved to be in this figure that's clearly weak against, other animals like a bear or something, but we've evolved to be not giant and claw-like and ready to like endure the worst of our planet, but like almost soft compared to the rest to, develop our brain more. Why would that be the case, you think?
I think from an evolutionary perspective, I mean, one probably potentially major cause is that it facilitates highly complex social networks.
And why would that be an evolutionary thing? Why would we want that?
Um, because I mean, there's strength in numbers, and
Oh,
and
well,
in go yeah, keep going.
no, the strength in numbers and what were you gonna say?
Well, I think what it allowed us to do is communicate in a complex nature, and which probably at the very beginning allowed for highly effective tactics, but also allowed us to um, expand the size of our tribe, which I think has survival benefits. Um,
Yeah, and what and this is great. This is leading towards yeah, kind of where I want to go with it. And it's got survival benefits not just because of hunting and not because of complex conversations, but also because of the added complexity for opportunities of healing, of experience, of exploration, of understanding, right, of connection. Um, I mean, not just with other humans, but with land and with animal, with God, with
See, so I would say that's no longer necessarily an evolutionary perspective, but a divine one. This
so
has a divine element. I think it's in an evolutionary perspective. I think it's easier to say that a lot of those things are byproducts of a highly complex conscious capacity.
yeah, I mean that's a social reductionist perspective, but I think everything is divinity personally. I'm definitely a
I no,
panpsychist.
I agree with you.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
I totally agree with you. I
Right.
prefer that perspective.
But
I'm
what's
yeah.
interesting is this isn't a different like I don't think that's able to be separated out. And I think
Mm,
existentialism does like a great job of explaining how like an individual doesn't get away with anything, right? It's like if you act inauthentically to yourself, you will punish yourself for it continuously, and you'll have trouble sending yourself love, like we talked about
yeah,
before the
yeah,
miser
yeah,
thing.
yeah.
Uh, and why is that? Because we're like meaning oriented creatures, right? And so it's like, why are we meaning oriented creatures? What is it that like we need to, what is it about us that we need to like have this meaning in us, right? If that's not like a piece of our complex and developed awareness. And I would make the argument that it's a piece of our God consciousness. And
I
because of
agree.
that complexity, we can like, it seems like the goal, and this is to the point about love being a newer, um, recognition in humans, maybe I should say, rather than like an energy, but the energy is finding its way still through us in a way where it seems like we're evolving this to mitigate pain globally, to almost turn pain down for as many individuals as possible. It seems like this is the like enlightened society concept the Mahayana Buddhists talk about. And like, if we are really going to align ourselves with like God consciousness, it's like, you don't want to hurt other people, right? Like that hurts you to hurt other people. We know this. This is like, very fundamental. And so like what's the opposite of that? It's like, okay, how do we create the most prosperous situation for the most people, the most unified situation for the most people? And it might seem like we're more divisive than ever, but if you look on the statistics long term, it's like people are living longer, people are healthier. There's a lot of metrics that show that we are doing that. We're moving in that direction. Even the evolution of philosophy, of psychology, all these things are about like how to live right, not just by yourself, but for other and in community, and how we can, mitigate pain, needless pain, right? And maximize maybe the right amount of pain, and create the right amount, create the right individuals to be able to kind of trek this path that we're engaging in. And I think that's the way that humanity is moving. If it doesn't get interrupted by, you know, war, or, if evil doesn't like totally envelop the good that we're creating.
Yeah, I agree. But I heard a cool perspective. It was making a case that evil fundamentally can't win, and the reason for it is that evil lacks the capacity to empathize. Truly, like the evil can get in the head of another person in order to manipulate them, but the evil can't understand the good. It can't understand its enemy. Whereas the good understands evil. It strives to understand evil in order to be good. Because it's in order to be, let's say, truly good as a human being, is compassion. And if I'm going to experience compassion to as many human beings as I can possibly, is that what that would require of me is to see the people that I deem as evil and find the compassion in it. Where is their pain? Why do they do these things? And then approach them with love. Whereas evil, or when evil consumes people, it doesn't strive to understand in that way. It's inherently narcissistic.
Like an Ouroboros, like it'll just eat
It
itself
eats
eventually,
itself.
kind of thing.
And it's know thy enemy.
Mm-hmm.
And evil, actually, okay, so vulnerable moment. So the context for this, I get really frustrated in a lot of college settings, but generally, both at my previous college and at Naropa and here at Trinity, with a lot of people talking about something like racism. And my frustration is that people are all saying, this is a problem, this is a problem, this is a problem. You have it. I don't have it. You have it. And no one ever, not no one, I've met a handful of people who do this, but no one ever looks within themselves to go, okay, am I? Am I actually? And I think that what the realization is, it's like, oh, this is actually a human thing. This is a tribal reflex that can manifest under certain stress conditions. And it's not just racism. It's any kind of delineation that is outside of our perception of tribe. Mm-hmm. And so I had this practice where what I was doing is I was allowing the darkest parts of my mind to arise when witnessing people, when witnessing and especially traveling in other places. So in very foreign places. So I'm a little more stressed. It's definitely different around people who do not look exactly like me. But I was intentionally allowing the darkest things to arise. And I wouldn't judge it initially. Because I think what often happens for me, and I believe for other people, is that we judge it so quickly, we feel shame for it, and we push it down. We never understand what's happening. We never allow the darker parts of our shadow or our monkey mind to arise, to fully understand it and accept it. And then once we can see it clearly, then we can deal with it. This is internalized racism or internalized sexism or whatever it is.
Sure.
And so I had this experience. I was in an airport, and I was having a bunch of these thoughts, that were stereotyping people, and I was seeing this one group of people in this way, and it was a lot of hate, a lot of vitriol, a lot of disgust, like, arising, and I'm watching it, and I don't like seeing it, but I'm actively trying to pay attention to what's going on in my mind so I can try and understand it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm about to get on a flight. I take the rest of my currency that I had because I was leaving the country. And I go to this stand. I get a few things, I hand them the money, and I'm like 5 cents short, something like that, in the local currency. And it's the rest I have. And so it's like, and it's a local currency that is not so 5 cents is really like, it's nothing, but it means it's a slight inconvenience. I have to take one of my items out, and I'm already worked up, frustrated about a lot of things, not just what's going on in my mind. It's early in the morning, hungry, yada, yada. And what happened was, is he was like, oh, it's not enough. And I'm like, oh, okay. Like, and I go to take it, to put it back. And he's like, no. And I'm like, dude, what are you doing right now? I don't have enough. Let me put this thing back. And he's like, no. And I'm getting, so all of these things are welling up, right? All of just everything that was working, that, and it's all present in my mind. And I'm like, what do you, and we're the language barrier, we're struggling. And he's like, no, you're good. He's like, take it. And there was this moment where I was so surprised. It's also in an airport. I wouldn't expect something like that in an airport. But I was so surprised, and all of the hate and vitriol that was arising in me immediately stops. Full break. It's confused. It doesn't know how to proceed, because the information in what I just experienced contradicts everything that was going on in my mind.
Nice.
And in that moment, when I was walking away, I realized is that love or kindness confuses hate.
Yeah, dude.
Hate doesn't understand it. And I think it stops it. I think it stops the loop. I think this is kind of when, do you know a guy named Daryl Lewis, I think is his name?
Well, that sounds familiar, but no.
So he goes around, and he's a jazz musician, jazz blues musician, and African-American man. And he finds like KKK members or Nazis and befriends them. And just by befriending them, just tries to say, you don't need to do this. We could be friends. And he has like converted, like he has brought, I think, over 100 plus kind of rough, gruff, like white men out of KKK, out of the neo-Nazi movement, just via his friendship and cool personality.
Yeah, I think you told me about him before, actually.
Yeah.
Now I think of it. Wow.
And so to me, I feel like that connects deeply, because when someone gets to experience something that with someone of any group that they might have these stereotypes or these hateful feelings towards, or fear, is that when they experience love or connection, it disrupts the whole cycle.
Yes.
And I think there's really something to that.
I've experienced that for sure. Especially at Naropa. It's very much like a shock to people sometimes. Whenever you're nice to them, especially, sometimes being in certain bodies. But that's awesome. Yeah, it's fascinating, man. I'm curious, one of the things that you wanted to talk about was education, and that's what you're doing out there in Dublin right now, and studying that, getting your master's in the early ed. And I'm curious how this concept right now bleeds into that and how you might use that, I guess, or maybe where our education system now is looking the other way, maybe around exercises and how people can truly see each other, or common spaces that we can create where it's not so mentally segregated, I guess. I
Yeah.
don't even know what to put it. Yeah.
Yeah. It's, I think there's a lot of really good intention within the field of education right now, and there's a lot of great innovation when regarding like inclusive education practices, and the intention is fundamentally to create quality education for all and to create spaces where everyone can be a part of. Now, that poses some very serious challenges. And a lot of teachers, from some of the research that I was seeing recently, a lot of teachers don't they have a lot of hesitancy towards an inclusive classroom. And an inclusive classroom could look like, you know, half your kids speak English, half your kids speak Spanish. It could look like socioeconomic. It could look like people with different placements on a variety of different. What I was seeing is that teachers generally have a hesitancy towards it when they don't feel prepared. But the more training that they receive, the better their attitudes are towards these kind of inclusive education for all environments. And so I think a lot of it is we need to be training teachers differently in order to handle diversity, because it's just a challenge. We can't deny that it doesn't pose a serious challenge. And also kids are brutal. Like, kids generally perceive adults as more pro-social than they do other kids. And so kids have more, so kids have of course, kids are friends with other kids, and so those are their close people a lot of the time. But there's a general attitude, or at least I've seen research that suggests, and in my own experience, is that kids just can be brutal, bullying, sensitivity coming up, coming of age, all these different things going on. We socialize and get accustomed to norms over time, and so even for the younger ages, diversity can pose an even more serious challenge. Because of just childhood. We're coming up, things are flaring.
Okay, I see. So by more pro-social, you mean like they're just adults would be more open or more safe than other kids?
So pro-sociality could be defined as a combination of altruistic behavior. So like giving, kindness, generosity, and cooperative behavior. So like working together towards collective goal. That would be considered pro-social, versus antisocial is, narcissistic, oppressive,
So kids are perceiving other kids as not pro-social, like not kind of going
let's just
together
say
in a collective.
less pro-social than adults.
Okay.
And it varies depending on how well you mesh with any given group.
Yeah. Interesting.
And
I mean, it makes sense. It makes sense.
And I think the fundamental challenge that is being talked about seemingly in some circles, but is kind of being avoided, is in the hot take is that I think we're actually talking in the greater society, maybe even as well, but especially in the school system, is we're talking too much about diversity. And this is not to say we shouldn't acknowledge diversity in all of our differences, and especially that different groups have different needs, right? But what this is saying is that it kind of, even back to what you were saying, I forget which thinker you were quoting, but or it was the Sufi, where you focus your attention is where the connection or the love or the growth happens. And so the more we focus on the things that divide us, the more apparent it becomes.
Yeah.
And I think we've passed a threshold where that's actually detrimental.
Yes, dude, I couldn't agree more.
Right. And so this is the nuance. It's important to still acknowledge the diversity and the multiplicity. However, if you want to be inclusive, there needs to be some form of unifying principle of how do you, like, even if every child is unique, like, what is the thing that unifies all of them? Which to me, in the same way for the adult context, is just our common humanity. Is to make that the primary source of identification.
Yeah, and I think that's necessary. I think that's necessary. I'm gonna have to reference the podcast I just had with Ramon because actually, with the last bit of it, we were talking about. I was kind of bringing up the case that there's no mechanism. Like right now, what we're doing is we're acknowledging all the difference and all the atrocities and all the reasons why we should not unify and all of the hurt left over from our forefathers arguments and our forefathers engagements and situations that you know weren't acknowledged at the time, and I agree need to be acknowledged, right, and needs to be healed. But I think we're at a point where there needs to be a mechanism for unification. Like, yes, we can acknowledge each other's differences. How do we get on the same page and be like, yo, we're one,
Mm-hmm.
like, how can I be one with you? It's like, okay, yeah, we acknowledge all this other stuff that we were all thrown into in this postmodern cyclone, right? That we're just thrown into it. And we figure out who we are. We realize our privilege, our non-privilege. We realize our social location. We realize our identification with gender, with race, with familial bonds, with whatever sports teams. I don't know. It's like, but ultimately it's like, where in our culture do we have this, let's get together and be a community? I don't care if you're different. Like, I embrace your difference as eyes added to a collective that I cannot see through, right? And I value that truly in my heart. It's like, where is that? So I think a lot of people are looking towards like a political like enforcement, right, of
Mm-hmm.
this sort of thing. And this is the thing that scares me with a lot of like the inclusivity language, is like a lot of like forcing people into a unification and actually like a erosion of culture, because we're just trying to make everything be like, a social construction optimization of like, here's where everyone should be exactly,
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
you just
From
can't
someone's
do
own
that.
bias, right?
Yeah.
Like, I think this the answer for me lies kind of returning back to Piaget.
Hmm.
And so so this idea of like the game or a game is like there's a little container and it has a set of rules, and there's a goal and an orientation of how you play, right? And what you're playing towards. And so, we know games as board games, video games, tag, you know, things like this, dodgeball. Um, but then this analogy, it's actually, this container is a pan-human or all-encompassing phenomena, is that we never stop playing games. And so the games just get more complex over time. And so let's say in the adult sphere, it's like you have the game that is your job. You have the game that is your, let's say, even your relationships in any given relationship. It's not to say, oh, it's just a game to like downgrade it. It's like, no, it's like a
No,
game.
right.
Like it's
There's rules.
there's rules of how you're going
Yeah.
to behave. And to me, this is what pro-sociality actually is it's basically, how do we figure out a way in which we can both expect and be okay with how each other's going to act, to the point where we will keep acting in this way and we'll keep playing.
Yeah.
And that's what pro-sociality is, because it's a continued bond. It forms relationships over time. And so there's the game of the economy, there's the political game, there's
Sure.
the community game, there's nested games, right?
Yes.
And but coming back to like literally the playground, is, so I see the playground as literally the precursor to all of society's behaviors.
Mm.
And so it's in the playground can be many different things. It doesn't have to be a, classical playground, just the place of play, wherever it is. When kids are doing this, it's like kids are playing games. They're fumbling around trying to figure out how to interact with each other. And they're exploring in this process. And depending on the games they play will determine how they grow, the skills in which they gain over time. And also depending on the games will create cohesion or division. And so even returning to the dodgeball idea, one of the concerns in the paper, and it was interesting reading it because I played dodgeball when I was in middle school and when I was in Boy Scouts, and I love dodgeball.
Hell
Like,
yeah.
Initially I was probably nervous, but I ended up loving it over time. I was always excited to play it. And in the paper they were saying it's very popular. Like teachers describe it as it's a popular demand. If they're given the choice, many will choose. But the problem is that a game like dodgeball is first of all, the human body becomes a target. It is inherently dehumanizing in that aspect. And it is an elimination game, and it rewards specifically athletic, more aggressive or competitive males of any given age group. And so anyone that doesn't fit into that group becomes alienated and experiences a decrease in self-esteem and also anxiety. And what will happen is that they describe this, and I remember this in dodgeball, as team stacking. You get to choose your teams.
Yes.
The people who are good and end up picking each other. And so then what happens is that they do that so they can just obliterate the other team. And so while there's a lot of pros to dodgeball, you're learning a ton of motor skills. You're learning how to act in a pressurized situation. So that there's benefits. I'm not, disregarding like dodgeball as a game, but it poses problems because it's not necessarily a game that is inclusive. And that it's not a game that would facilitate the bonding of the whole. And so then my question, and what I'll try and figure out and navigate in my research, is that are there games that kids can play that are inclusive by nature, that the buy-in to the game is not a high bar. And so one of an example of that is that I'll probably look at some physical games, but inherently the game I'm looking for is not going to be highly physical, because one of the immediate barriers is movement disability.
Mm-hmm.
And so and then the question is, it's like, okay, well then what is language in the game? Because if there's language barriers, then that might create divisions, or it might create trouble. And so then, but there is a game. I fundamentally believe that there is a game that can be found that all humans can play. And it'll look like literally a playground kind of game. But the profundity of it, for me at least, or what I think for the idea, is that if a game like that could be designed, or if a game exists like that, or a set of games that exist like that, and they can be embraced in a school situation, especially in a very diverse environment, is that it will literally train and practice the skills necessary for a cohesive society that contains a lot of diversity and multiplicity in it. That the game is a vehicle for unification. Because play.
Yeah. Will there be winners and losers in this game?
It's a great question. It's a good question. I'll need to look at that.
Yeah, because I'm like, just hearing the way that you describe dodgeball, it's like, I was trying to think of the sport that doesn't hit all those same things. Except for, well, at first it's like the elimination thing seems like a unique kind of category, because like football, basketball, one's not necessarily getting eliminated. But whenever it comes to like some of the fight sports, and like
Yes.
wrestling and stuff like that, is available at school. Not so much MMA, but that's something kids do outside of
Hmm.
school too. But I think that's the most intense version of what you're talking about, right?
Yes.
Because you're by yourself and it's an elimination game, and you spend your life around training for that stuff. Like it's a identity wrapped up in that, right?
Hmm.
But what you learn is that what you learn by losing is that you are not your loss, right? And that's a mental thing to overcome by like putting yourself in the arena. And then what you learn by winning is that like you're capable, right? Like you can do it, right? And that's another like great thing to accomplish and do. And without the weight of all of that, how long, like how much is a victory worth of a game where we can just like keep playing it and everybody's kind of happy in it, and like, I feel like it's only a matter of time before it's like, oh, I did this more than you did this, right? I'm better actually at this than you. And
Oh,
so like,
for
or there'll
sure.
just be a hierarchy created in a meta game, maybe within the game, to be like, oh, that's the best player kind of thing,
Yeah, and it's human nature, but then this is the importance of the adult in the room, the facilitator, because um, it's another um, re- research that I was reading was basically humans observe, infer, and then imitate like the social norms of a given environment.
Yes.
This starts around age 8, at least, maybe earlier, um, where the children pretty rapidly will adapt to the local adults.
Mm-hmm.
And this is because we mimic each other constantly. I could go on for about modeling and how we mimic each other all the time, but that the adult in the room is the model, and that they are basically, not to get biblical, they're Moses.
Mm.
They're all the kids are coming up to you, or the kids are out and about and things are going, and you've got to discern between all these different moral conundrums,
Sure.
because humans, or the kids might just turn into Lord of the Flies in any given game. And so the adult in the room is really important. But kind of returning to the idea of the game is that I think, given that life is full of games, there should always, like, a multiplicity of games should be offered in an educational context for the development of skills and the development of character and of virtues and of all these things.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Let's say specifically on a game that facilitates the connection of humanity, that's oriented towards something. It's training. It's attempting to reward something else. And so, like, it could be a game where you don't complete it. It can be hard enough so that there's struggle, but that the behavior that is rewarded is helping another person get to the next stage or get to the
Mm.
next thing. So it could be something, I'm going to go look for these games. I would assume that there's actually a good few of these out there. If not, I think you could just design one that, let's say there's a whole,
Rewards you.
yes, there's a whole group aimed at a goal. It's hard enough, like that. It's not just easy, but it's engaging enough. It's challenging, and that it will reward you for basically helping each other figure it out,
Yeah.
and that the game only concludes and wins once every person has contributed.
Yeah, you could definitely make a game like that.
I think
Like,
so.
and even like
I think
getting
so.
through like an obstacle course of some kind that
Yes.
requires cooperative behavior, and the points go
Yes.
to whoever is like the most helpful, right?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah,
Yes. And,
right.
and and even like thinking of games like I mean jujitsu is a good example, but let's say like pool. Like I love playing pool. And there's a few games like this, where you're playing against someone else. Initially, when I first started playing pool, I'm just trying to beat my dad, or I'm just trying to beat my buddy. I just don't want to lose to them. Holy crap. But eventually I get good enough that I'm less concerned about it, and I'm looking for the quality of the game. And I end up, even if the game is set up that it's one person against one person, the real competition is actually within the person. Because I'm competing with myself to improve upon every shot.
Right.
And so the container of the game is I'm competing against this person, but the real
Mm.
competition is inward improvement. And so it could even just be like, there could be games that might be competitive still, but it's the attitude of how they're facilitated that might change how kids interact with it. I'm still in the beginnings of this research project.
Sure.
And so there's still a lot of different avenues to explore.
No, I like where you're going, and I'm happy to brainstorm anytime, dude.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Um, it's interesting, I obviously I don't have kids, but when I think about it, I mean, here's the thing too, man. It's like, I mean, I think what we're talking about is like a cultural ethic. And I think you're trying to get there through games, through teaching, through the educational system, which I think is where it belongs, personally. Because that's absolutely where I learned, about a bunch of different people, a bunch of different lives people are living. And I grew up playing street hockey and playing hockey and stuff like that. It's a very cooperative game. It's a very like know your position, play your position. If you hog the puck, nobody wants to play with you because it's a super cooperative game. It's not one where it's like in football where you kind of the quarterback makes the decision, the team runs their line, quarterback hits the person that's open, and then that's the end of that run until the next one. It's just like ongoing. And if you're not in your position because you overstepped or you wanted to be a star or, take somebody else's position selfishly, then your cooperation is like diminished, right? You're like,
Yes.
you're not somebody that people want to play with, especially if you're not that good, if you don't produce. The only way it works is if you actually produce every time, right? So like
That
there's
you're
some people that
so
make,
good, it's
and you're
undeniable.
so good. Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
that
Right.
people will put up with the selfishness.
Absolutely. But we're talking about a low percentage of the NHL, right? And so like,
But that's for any game. That's soccer, basketball.
but those are for any of those team games, right? Which I
Yeah.
find important. Which I find really important actually, because it is like, okay, for like a facilitator in a school setting, the important thing I think is to eliminate the ability to stack the teams, right?
Yes.
As a facilitator, you just can't have it where the kids just reign,
You can't let them
their
decide, actually.
dominance.
Yeah,
No, you can't.
you have to be able to evenly assess.
Right.
It's important to give kids agency, and yet they require certain structures. And I think specifically when it comes to team organization, it like, at least from my own experience and seeing the research that I think I was actually reading today, um, that should be done by the facilitator.
Yeah, and I think they should know why too. It's like, and because there needs to be
Explain.
a
Yeah.
reason why that's like repeated and why that's like an ethic ingrained where it's like, don't just get out of this situation and then like try to organize something out of it and then just be a total ass, because there's that too. But I think the reason why games specifically have been so manipulated lately in a sense where you have kids growing up and that everyone gets a trophy, generations, and the kind of everybody needs to be involved no matter what. There's a it's trying to be an antidote for a previous like power game, right? Where it's like the dad that's like the former NFL player like needs to get his son in there and we're gonna crush them and we're gonna like run stairs all day and we're gonna make sure whatever all this, you know, these people would vicariously live through these kids and ultimately like making their life hell and other kids' life
Yeah.
hell, right? And so like
Yes.
making it like a war situation. And that's like an ethic, I think, in our society that we just didn't handle correctly.
Yeah.
Right. That's like something that kind of like ran away to the point where now we have to be like, no dodgeball, everyone gets a trophy, all this shit. And so now we're trying to like swing back and be like, no, it's important. Sports are important. Right. But like at the same time, if we're not aimed towards some direction, some like unified kind of moral that like, this is why we're playing games, this is how we're stacking the games, this is the importance of the game, then
Yeah.
it's just
Explaining
going
the
to be dead to
why.
that. Yeah.
Yes. I agree. I think, all right, going back into controversial mode. All right. So I'm going to go a little woo woo for a moment and then rein it back in. And so, okay. So I have a paternal instinct. I also have a maternal instinct. It might not be as pronounced as women, but I would describe it as such, and that they're distinct. And that for me, in my experience, that the maternal instinct is like, I've got you no matter what. I'm going to bring everybody in together. Nobody's left out. Like, and hold from here.
Mm.
The paternal instinct is push.
Mm.
You've got more. Let me see more.
Mm.
And I heard it was actually Jordan Qualia sent me a cool research paper last year about compassion, and it had this term in it called paternalistic empathy, and it was the intentional downregulating of empathy, so the withdrawal of empathy for the sake of the target's growth.
Mm.
And so this is classically fatherly love. This is gonna hurt. You're going to suffer, but this is for your own good. Let's say
Right.
in its best form.
Yes.
When it's true.
Right.
This is for your own good.
Yes.
Whereas the maternal instinct is very nurture oriented, and it's like, oh, you've went out there, you've fallen. Let's get you back healthy so that you can get back out there.
Mm-hmm.
Let's make sure you're cared for in that case. And so, okay, so these two ideas. So now I think when I see a lot in inclusive education as a field and a phenomena, this desire to include all, to make sure no one's left out, and that is inherently equity driven. It is trying to raise everyone who like all the different needs, to raise everybody up to a common bar, right? And I'm all about this. And I say that I think it is a maternally driven phenomena in the way that I'm describing it.
Sure.
Now to describe the controversial element, which is controversial to some people maybe within inclusive education, but a lot of parents I think would resonate with this, is that, so in my experience when I was teaching part-time back in Colorado, and I'm in this classroom, and the kids are all like 11, 12, but developmentally they're everywhere, all in these different spots. And they're also a very diverse group. But they're all uniquely in a different developmental spot. And, we're moving on a lesson, and I get split. And there is one group that is just having behavioral stuff. They're freaking out. They're trying to get attention, is what they're trying to do. They're desiring attention. Or they haven't cooled off in a certain manner. It's middle school, so I'm no harm, no foul. That's how it goes.
Yeah.
But I have to give them attention because that's what's demanding it. And there's a few other kids, silent, ready to go, ready to listen, ready to learn. But because of the demand elsewhere, I can't give them my attention, even if they're ready to go. This creates a serious dilemma because my attention as a teacher is the reward to children. And so I am rewarding disruptive behavior out of necessity because there's demand.
Right.
And I am punishing via the withdrawal of my attention from those who are ready and doing the thing that I asked them to do.
Yeah.
And so this is the difficult idea is that, I want to be able to offer an education that is unifying, that helps all, regardless of where anybody's at.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a part of me that wants those kids that are ready to move on to just take the highway, get on the rocket, and just go as hard as you can, and just learn and push and do all these things. And I think that's kind of getting lost in inclusive education because it creates a division of performance. And it's difficult. I'm not saying I have a solution for that.
Sure. Yeah. What the heck do you do about that?
But I think there is an argument to be made from a societal standpoint for the prosperity of our society, for the advancement of technology, for the advancement of the humanities, for everything, is that there are people, there's so much potential in all of these students. And there's some of them that are just high performers naturally. Nature does this, right? And it doesn't determine whether or not they all have their own unique value as human being inherently. But also, is there a responsibility upon the educator to highlight those high performers and put them on a fast track?
Which is what?
Well,
because also how do you do that without as immediately exclusive, right? We're just like, oh, these kids are right.
It becomes, and so maybe theoretically there is a way to engage. I would say there's an easy way and a hard way. The easy way is just split the systems, which is kind of what we have, but it's not a direct reflection of it, which is public-private.
Right.
Right. But it doesn't even really map on because think of all of the high performers that exist in public school statistically.
Yeah.
And where versus in private school, sure, there's going to be high performers because they're given all these resources, but a lot of them, not, and they just get in because their parents have money.
Yeah.
And so it's not an actual reflection of basically schools that we highlight all of the high performers, put them in this lab, and then, they go become, all these different professions.
Right.
And so that would be the easy way.
Yeah.
Is two parallel systems. But
or just multiple different ones.
For sure. But that's kind of what we have.
Well, it kind of is, but it's also not, in a sense where it's like you said, it's more class dependent how you end up in one of those or the other. It's not so much on your performance.
Yes.
I mean, of course, there are some schools that are focused on performance.
For sure.
But you want to play $30,000 for, sixth grade, it's like, okay. So people just don't really have that access to be able to, fast track their kid. So yes, it's available as an option if you have the right money. But I mean, it's just another kind of jab at the way that our country does education.
Exactly.
Right? It's
And
just we're working with like this paradigm that doesn't give a shit about it and is like constantly draining it of funds and like making it more difficult to be a teacher and like holy cow, man. Yeah.
yeah, and so generally there needs to be a cultural shift that that is followed directly by an economic and political shift to support the school systems, because no improvement is going to occur unless there's more, literally just more money and attention being put in,
Yeah.
um,
Right.
and and bodies, frankly, and that would come with the money and the attention. But
They come
like,
with the money. Yeah.
but
Cause
we
right
just
now
need more
it's like,
people.
yeah.
Like, and so, but okay, so here's the hard way. Let's say, which this, I think there's something really interesting here. It's a inclusive setting. You've got a microcosm of the whole society in this classroom, right? All different intersectional identities. They're all present. And so, but you have the same problem that a few of them on random, high performers, ready to go. And then a few of them on random are, I'm not even going to relate it to performance. It's more of that, for any given reason, that they're in a certain place where they require more attention from the teacher. And in my experience, that was like behavioral related. Specifically, they needed attention. It could be that they're not receiving it at home. And so that there's varying reasons, and that can manifest in many different backgrounds. But so let's say same situation, microcosm of the whole society. Like if we could break out of the structure, maybe our current model of it, how we structure periods and size a classroom and just one teacher per classroom and all these things. But maybe even make a larger classroom, 2 teachers in there. And the ones that are ready, or the ones that are the high performers, whatever this means, are given greater responsibility to help their peers. And so instead of just what we normally do, which is put them in an advanced program or give them extra work to do because they're ready to move on, but us as teachers have to deal with the rest of the class.
Yeah.
That we give them more agency as a reward, and we give them responsibility and an ability to help, and then basically help the teachers by positively interacting with the rest of the classes, or by the rest of their classmates. And
Right.
so to me that arises, it would be difficult.
Yeah.
Takes structural changes, and there's definitely complications in that. But I see a lot of the time in education, especially in school leadership or structure or design, be a slew of problems. And I'm, if I'm doing like a case study or I'm doing, an assignment, there's a bunch of problems. 2 of those problems can be pitted against each other. They solve each other if you orient correctly. And so let's say there is the challenge of the kids who are bored and are ready to move on, and the kids who need a little extra boost, but the teacher is struggling to help those kids and to help those kids, right? You can literally take those kids and sit them next to those kids. And of course, easier said than done. There's a lot of working around to do that, and there's a lot of issues. But I think though that fundamentally, if you have a less hierarchical than normal classroom setting, kind of like a dialogue setting where it's a little more distributed, then other leaders will arise if they're given the opportunity to take agency. And then I think that's a great learning opportunity for kids who are ready for that. Huge opportunity. And then they get the chance to bond and assist the rest of their classmates. And it might also at the same time ease a little bit of the burden of the teacher and make a more effective classroom. This is an ideal. That's why I say it's the hard way. I think this is the hard way. This is why we don't do it. It takes more resources and it takes a lot of thinking outside the box.
Yeah, and it's almost like if somebody doesn't want to be a tutor, high performer doesn't want to be like in the tutor role for another student that's like at the same level as them. Maybe for some like social thing, I could see them like not wanting to perform because they don't want to take that role. And who
Oh
knows?
yeah, I
Like,
see what you mean.
you know what I mean? Because like I don't want to, maybe it's the smart kid that like would be assigned to like, the bully or something, right? And just be like, oh, I don't want to work with them, or, I don't, or somebody that's like completely socially anxious, because that's kind of the other element. As we're kind of going through time. Go ahead. What are you gonna say?
Maybe that's the push though.
What? Oh, having to be the tutor?
It's like, oh, this is uncomfortable for you? Perfect. Like, and that's not the attitude of many inclusive minded educators. However, like, if it's within their zone of development,
Yeah.
it's not too far out and it's not too easy. It's, oh, it makes you uncomfortable in the right way. Maybe you should go do that. But this, to be able to do that gracefully, requires a lot of teacher training in a different method of educating, basically.
A totally different method of educating. Yeah, like frankly, I think the different methods are the key. Personally, for instance, there is nothing in our school systems that would say like you could take a group of like four kids, right? Say you had like a class, right? And you chopped everybody into like four, right? And then you like you had each of them cooperatively solve different puzzles together, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there will be different like aspects of it. One would be like navigational, one would be like mechanical, one would be like mathematic, one would be like social, right? And you can even assign these kids that role in the game, and then like them cooperatively kind of going through these problems and then switching up the teams
Yep.
could work because it's
I think that's a
important to
great
get.
idea.
The thing is just like I sucked at academic rigor as a child, especially in high school, because the way in which stuff is just kind of slammed at you one way, and like the have all the readings and the way that the structure is, and frankly, I had an authority issue, and so like I didn't respect a lot of the teachers. That there's a whole thing, but there's not many opportunities for how somebody can learn. It's one way. It's sitting in a classroom, learning from the teacher directly,
I know.
right? And we
I
know
know.
like that through other studies that like the majority of learning happens when everyone's learning together, right? Everybody's like solving on a problem collectively. It's not like
Yeah.
I'm going to sit here and tell you. It's like, no, here's the problem. How are we going to fix it?
Yes.
Right?
I
It's like
agree.
if we could
Project based.
replicate that, yeah,
Yeah.
if we could replicate that, I feel
And there are
like
schools that do this. There
mm,
are schools that function on a project based like curriculum. They don't really
mm,
work with tests.
yeah,
Like um and so this is out there. I think um did you went to public school as well?
yes,
Yeah. And so I it's interesting. The more I'm like telling people I'm studying education, the more people are like, "Oh, have you heard this school?" And every time they say that, it's a different school and it's a different unique thing.
mm,
And so it's really exciting because now I have a bunch of different schools and different models to go check out that sound
yeah,
cool. And so I
yeah.
think a lot of people, a lot of good people are doing a lot of really cool things, you know, generally. But what we're talking about is the national public school system and how that's
Frankly, dude,
structured.
if I were to have a kid today, right, and maybe this is like the I know how deep we are into this, and maybe this is like an entry for the second podcast. But if I would have a kid today, I know most of the jobs are going to be taken over by AI or humanoid
Yeah.
bots.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's like, what in the world am I going to teach that? What should I send them to public school? you know?
I actually fully changed my research proposal on that realization. It like finally clicked into me where I'm like, oh, there is a solid chance that in 20 to 50 years, we're looking at an unemployment rate of 20 to 80%.
That's 50. That's wow. I feel like it's a lot sooner. But
Oh,
yeah,
I'm being
that's
conservative,
being,
but even
yeah,
that is scary.
yeah, right.
Like, even that is catastrophic. I agree that it's sooner. I think it could happen very rapidly. So, okay, if that's true, the advance of artificial intelligence and robotics it's hitting the elbow, and it's getting really good, and it's being applied to everything, and it starts taking everybody's jobs, white collar, blue collar, across the board. Um, our whole school system, well, the American public education system, American education system generally, is based on the Prussian model. And the Prussian model, Prussia, Proto-Germany, their system was designed to create industrial workers and soldiers. And we adopted it. I'm pretty sure Rockefeller brought that in. A bunch of people brought it in, but I think he was one of them. And this is why we sit in rows. It's why we have a bell schedule. It's why a lot of the designers of schools, the only other kind of building they design are prisons.
Prisons, yeah, yeah.
And
Right.
and so, like, and the whole goal and what we're trying to pitch, to what we're trying to convince ourselves of, or let's say, like, if, like, what parents are trying to convince themselves of, or to convince the children, is you're going to school so that you can learn the skills so that you can get a job and then become a functioning member of society. That's the pitch.
Right. Right.
And that's unreasonable. We're already seeing the beginning of it. And so this is actually why this is why I changed my research, is because I think that there's still a value in school. There's still value in education. And I think what it is that a school is a place for fostering curiosity.
Sure.
And I think the school is the primary place that we socialize outside of the house. And so, seeing it in that way, if we're not training, if there are no jobs left and we can't train kids to, take jobs, then what are we doing?
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that looks a lot more like the Naropa model of what are humans? How do we be more human? And how do we get
Absolutely.
along? And so the social emotional aspect becomes paramount,
Mm-hmm.
because the creative element becomes paramount, because what else do we got? And that's the good stuff too. So I'm excited about that, frankly.
Good stuff for sure. For
You know,
minds like people like you and I, but for the mechanical mind, it's a scary move.
yeah, they'll find some stuff. They'll find some stuff.
They'll work on them.
Yeah, they'll
I mean,
they'll
they
work
just
on
work
them.
on bots. They'll work on. They might be that because, and they probably won't even do that. Actually, maybe for a
No,
little bit they'll do
there'll be
that.
bots that work on bots.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah, no,
So
it's
like they can build stuff at their, but man, I don't know. Like I just, where do you put the, there was already a statistic that was like 15% of the population wouldn't be able to make the ASVABs or pass the ASVABs, which are the tests you got to take to get into the military.
oh yeah. It's a
Basically
large
saying that,
percentage. Yeah.
yeah, it's like basically saying that the military, any branch, say the army, like thinks that 15% of the United States population, probably I believe it's more now actually,
Mm-hmm.
are better off not being in the military than in the military, which is just like a crazy thing. Like if the military won't take you, um, that's a rough spot to be at,
Oh, oh, and you know, I'm not a big fan of socialism and communism for in their manifestations in history. However, if there are no jobs and we still need money, government's got to
and
step
people are
up. If
living
not,
longer.
oh, people are going to
Yeah.
riot. Like, and but then I think in the Western frame, that is permeated now across the globe, is that we associate our value and our self-worth based on what we can do,
And production, yeah. But
what
we
we can
also measure
produce.
our meaning there too. So like I get that
This is a
argument.
serious problem. And
Yeah,
but so
right.
then, but that's not the only place. It's the other greatest sense of meaning that I would say is actually greater than anything that we do is it's actually the reason we do anything we do is for the people we care about. It's, on when anyone's on their deathbed, the one thing they ask for is the people they care about.
Sure.
It's the thing that matters the most. And so I think that the opportunity that's arising is to say, you are valuable, not because of what you can do for me or what you can do for society. You are inherently valuable, no matter what. And that we can now work on understanding ourselves and each other. And this is full circle. This is love. Unconditional. Doesn't matter what you do. Doesn't matter what you're capable of. Can we connect? Can we hang out? And I think it's a matter of of the continuation of the human species, whether we can figure out how to hang out.
Yeah.
Do you know?
Yeah, I do. And I think you're right about the pigeonholing of purpose. But that's what it is. And that's, I guess, a concern of mine is that, like,
for sure.
man, it's like if you're an artist and you value your art, and then you see like an AI do something that, is just like the combination of all your favorite artists that you've been like creating your own style off of. Yes, they might not be able to do the same as you, but you watch the development and it feels hopeless to even like start in that direction. It's like, why even learn to paint whenever I could just like, prompt AI to do what I want and I could spit it out that way. And then there's all these, it's just, what when we pigeonhole purpose into like just exploring existentially like why, maybe questions is why we're here, right? What is God still is going to be a question. Who, like, what is human nature? How do we minimize pain for most people and create opportunity for authenticity? If those are like what's ultimately human, whenever these things kind of eliminate all those other expressions, get into that's just going to be that's going to be a really difficult thing. People are just going to be really willing to, in my opinion, to just merge,
I agree. I agree. I think this is that's definitely one of the pathways. I'm going to posit, just for the sake of it, a different pathway.
Yeah, because there's many, but yeah.
Well, but let's just say we figured out everything. We figured out what God is. We figured out human nature. Suffering no longer exists. And like, you know what I mean? Whatever, you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
the only thing left to do is hang out. We will come all the way back around to sitting by the fire, telling stories.
Stories about what you saw on Instagram.
No, it's people will still have lives. People will still go travel. People will talk about like, oh, my dog, my houseplant. They'll play guitar. They don't care whether they're good or not. That's not why people play guitar. And so think we started as a species sitting around a fire pit, cold, hungry, suffering, fully traumatized, but we're all there together hanging out. And then we go this whole distance. We solve all the problems. And then we get back there, we're like, oh, this was pretty good, actually. But now now it's even better.
Yeah, I mean, I hope that's the outcome.
I like envisioning, I'm always devil's advocate.
No, and that's good, it's good.
And so no matter what is like given to me, I'll come with the inverse. And so usually people are painfully optimistic in an abysmal world. And then I'm
Yeah,
coming with the cynical take.
right.
But so now I got it like, but I like envisioning the beautiful tomorrow
Yeah,
because
well, you know,
it gives us a morning star.
it gives us
It
a
gives
morning
us it
star.
gives us the North Star rather.
Yeah, I just think it's important to be okay. So, like, say that fire situation happened, right? Like,
Yeah.
we've solved all the problems, we've created this world, we're sitting by the fire, and then we like take our VR goggles off. We just like are actually like in this kind of fifth element space. Um, is that necessarily bad? I mean, I don't know. I really try to stay optimistic about a potential transhuman movement. I don't think it's good
Like
for
merging with
humans.
technology.
Yeah, because we already are. We already are to a degree. Cognitive offloading has shown that, and virtual identity is obvious, right? It's almost that what's said online is like more gospel than what's said in person at all. The what's perceived on here is much more real than what's perceived in physical reality for a lot of people. And that's before any like BCIs or like any type of like cybernetic additions or something that which are coming. So I guess like uh there is a lot to look forward to if we were to do that, frankly. Like, as long as our brains aren't connected, right? As long as we're not like, because here's the thing, like, you won't be able to know if you're a hive mind or not. You won't know what memories are yours or other people's. You won't know, you won't really be able to, I don't know. It'll be very hard to distinguish a self if you're connected to the internet and other people can see through your eyes and you can see through others. And there's like the telepathic kind of downloading of thought and everything. It's all
Yeah.
gonna mesh together
Yeah.
a lot. But if you have like biological, if you change just simple like biology, and you've probably heard me say this before, but like if you could change your lungs to like synthetic lungs, and you can make like cybernetic legs and stuff like that, like to be able to walk like hand in hand with your partner along the Great Barrier Reef and just like taking in full breaths, and you can be having conversations like underwater and stuff
Yeah.
like
It'd be pretty
that.
gangster.
Sounds amazing, right?
Yeah.
And like, so does like what that would mean, if we can find a way to, have our energy source run off like solar or something like that to really be like an interplanetary species, and what that means for like the exploration of that frontier and the colonization of other planets.
Mm-hmm.
um we were very focused on what it would be like on this world, right? Like, oh, it will be like totally intermingled with machine. But if the goal is interplanetary, that could be rad. I don't know, it could be
That
rad.
could be pretty cool.
Yeah,
Like
so like
that.
it's not all terrible.
No, it's not. But I think there's a few that we either gotta fully slow our roll and regulate the hell out of AI and robotics, which is not gonna happen.
Not gonna.
Um, we somehow create a really positive symbiotic relationship with robotics and AI, more plausible than the previous. It, or
Is it?
not, it's going from 1% to 2%. Like
Yeah.
it, or we pull a Dune and we just revolt against AI and just do really cool math in our head and just take machines all the way out.
Yeah, man, it's interesting too because like in Dune, Kaladin is the Atreides. So like for instance, Kaladin is like the whole planet, right, of the Atreides people, which is like what the where Paul
Is from, yeah.
Moadib originally is from. The whole people is the planet. Like it's one people, right? Like that's my point in the Dune universe. Um, you know, it's like the Fremen are on Arrakis, right? It's like the Ixians are wherever they're at. What I'm trying to say is like there's one people for each planet, right?
Yeah.
And like when we're talking about, and I'm getting very metaphorical here, but like in Frank Herbert's concept of how human would even combat machine in a universe is like global culture, global people, right? It's
Yeah.
like
Oh, you
how
best.
in the world today would we ever unify as people to fight against a machine? Yeah, right. You know what I mean? Yeah,
Oh, but
right.
you best believe I would discriminate against some Martians.
Oh, you would.
No,
You would.
no, I would say save us.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hey man, maybe with this three, what is it? 3 eye thing or whatever.
Yeah,
You see that?
I've heard two things on it. One is
Yeah,
that, well, I've heard three things. One, comet, doesn't matter.
probably comment. Yeah.
Two, no, that's just the lame one. Um, two is, yeah, this is just straight up aliens, coming by. Wouldn't be surprised. And then three is total doomsday situation, that this is a false flag where
Yeah.
all the conspiracies manifest immediately and we're being invaded by a fake alien. This is, like,
That'd be
comet is
interesting.
probably preferable, but it's kind of lame.
Yeah. At least it's kind of shiny. That's cool.
It is shiny.
Yeah. Well, dude. Well, I think we're at a little over 2 hours.
Cool.
Probably a good place to cap it now. But we should come back to this because I know there's things that we wanted to touch in on that maybe we just didn't get to in this conversation. I wanted to we kind of circled around the like idea of like God having a concept and it being embodied in like a in a species or an animal or something like that, and the like concept of that going forward. But I did want to kind of speak to you about the origin of certain maybe energies that people are plugged into that are like they're ultimately like leading to certain decisions a lot of people are making.
Yeah.
And I'd love to touch it on that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
and then also continuing the conversation on education and like how we're seeing what education even means today, because it's almost like in a previous conversation I had with Rory, actually, it's that there's almost a religious fundamentalism around social constructivism. And so the super educated are like social constructivists, fundamentalists, and they
Yeah.
are. And so, like, how do we combat that? How do we like pull our culture into a more sacred space, starting with education?
Yeah.
But
Cool.
yeah, maybe we
And
can
by
pick that
next
up.
time, I'll have read a good deal more and have made progress on this specific topic as well. So I'll have more,
Hell yeah. Well, sick,
yeah.
bro. Well, I'm excited, man. Well, I appreciate you, dog.
Yeah. Thanks for
Catch you
talking,
next
man.
time.
Yeah, dude.
Hell yeah.